Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to do something really ambitious. We are compressing the sprawling 200-year history of computing into 5 major milestones. We're going to trace exactly how we got to the digital age, transforming some pretty primitive number-crunching concepts into the immensely powerful modern devices we rely on every single day to surf the web, stream media, and basically run our entire lives.
But before we jump into the timeline, I have to share this quote from Internet and Media Strategies founder Mitch Ratcliffe. He said, "A computer lets you make more mistakes faster than any other invention in human history, with the possible exceptions of handguns and tequila." It's hilarious, but it hits the nail on the head about modern efficiency. Today, we're unpacking the fascinating evolution of how these machines became so blazingly fast at executing our commands, whether those commands are right or wrong.
Here's our roadmap for the journey. We're looking at 5 distinct eras: the mechanical pioneers, Turing's universal machine, the electronic computer race, the transistor revolution, and finally, the consumer tech boom. Let's dive right in. Milestone 1, the mechanical pioneers. We're talking steam, looms, and algorithms. We're starting way back in the 19th century, an era built entirely on physical ingenuity. Believe it or not, the story really gets going in 1801 with Joseph-Marie Jacquard. He was a French merchant who invented a loom that actually used punched wooden cards to automatically weave fabric designs. Decades later, that punch card concept was adapted for data. By 1890, Herman Hollerith designed a punch card system for the U.S. Census. It was so incredibly efficient that it saved the government several years of calculations and roughly $5 million. And fun fact, Hollerith's company eventually became IBM. Then you have Charles Babbage's difference engine in 1821. Funded by the British government, this was a massive, steam-driven mechanical calculating machine meant to compute tables of numbers. The crazy part, it failed. But not because the idea was bad, it failed simply because the manufacturing technology of the time just wasn't precise enough yet to build the parts he needed. But even with those hardware limitations, the software side was already springing to life. In 1848, an English mathematician named Ada Lovelace was translating a paper on Babbage's analytical engine. She ended up adding her own annotations that were 3 times as long as the original transcript. In those notes, she laid out a step-by-step description for computing Bernoulli numbers with Babbage's machine. That was basically an algorithm, meaning Ada Lovelace was, for all intents and purposes, the world's very first computer programmer. Moving to milestone 2, Turing's universal machine, which gave us the ultimate theoretical breakthrough. The 1930s is when we see some massive conceptual leaps. In 1931 at MIT, Vannevar Bush builds the differential analyzer, the first large-scale automatic general-purpose mechanical analog computer. Then, in 1937, a professor named John Vincent Atanasoff submits a proposal for the first electric-only computer, meaning no gears, no belts, completely solid state. And right at the end of the decade, the modern tech corporate landscape is born. This era marks a monumental jump from analog machines with physical dials to true digital interfaces. And it's also an era of incredibly humble beginnings. Take 1939, when David Packard and Bill Hewitt founded Hewlett-Packard right in a Palo Alto garage. They literally tossed a coin to decide whose name went first on the company. But the absolute game changer of this era comes down to the brilliant British scientist Alan Turing. In 1936, he published a paper outlining a universal machine. The idea was beautifully simple but totally revolutionary, a theoretical device capable of computing literally anything that is computable. Every modern computer you use today is based entirely on his foundational ideas. Turing even went on to use these principles to help crack Nazi codes during World War II. That brings us to milestone 3, the electronic computer race, fueled by World War II and the urgent shift to digital. The early 1940s were incredibly high stakes. In Germany, Konrad Zuse finishes his Z3 machine, the world's earliest digital computer, though it was tragically destroyed in a bombing raid. Over in the US, Atanasoff and his grad student Clifford Berry designed the Atanasoff-Berry computer, or ABC. This was a massive deal because it was the first time a computer could actually store information in its main memory, and it could do one operation every 15 seconds, which back then was blazing fast. And then there's the ENIAC. In 1945, this absolute behemoth took up an entire room.
Built by John Mauchly and J. Presper Eckert at the University of Pennsylvania, operators had to manually plug and unplug complex wiring just to run it. It holds the title of the first automatic, general-purpose electronic digital computer. Obviously, it's a far cry from the smartphone in your pocket, but it completely proved what was electronically possible. Next up is Milestone 4, the transistor revolution. Time to ditch the vacuum tube.
So, 1947 brings us a massive, industry-altering breakthrough at Bell Laboratories. Inventors William Shockley, John Burdeen, and Walter Bertan figure out how to make an electric switch entirely out of solid materials. They named it the transistor. This is crucial because early electronic computers relied on vacuum tubes. And those tubes were a nightmare. They were bulky, they generated a ton of heat, and they burned out constantly. Switching to solid-state transistors meant there was no vacuum required at all. Suddenly, engineers could build machines that were exponentially smaller, cooler, and immensely more reliable.
By 1949, this shrinking tech allowed a team at Cambridge to develop the EDSA, the first practical stored program computer. Its very first job? Calculating a table of squares and prime numbers. Meanwhile, in Australia, that same year, scientists built the CSI-RAC. And this machine holds the super fun distinction of being the very first digital computer in the world to play music. Which leads us to our final era, Milestone 5, the consumer tech boom. Computing officially enters the home.
The dawn of the 1970s was just wild. Within a super-tight 3-year window, we see a rapid-fire string of commercial hits that literally laid the groundwork for all the personal tech we use today.
Think about this lineup. In 1970, a brand new company called Intel drops the first DRAM chip. In 1971, IBM gives us the floppy disk, so sharing data between computers is suddenly a breeze. And then in 1972, computing becomes pure entertainment. The Magnavox Odyssey drops as the very first home game console, quickly followed by Atari's legendary game Pong. Just like that, the computer was in the living room. So when you step back and look at this 200-year journey, going from steam-powered concepts and wooden punch cards to massive room-sized calculators, all the way down to the incredible digital powerhouse you're using to listen to this explainer right now, it really makes you wonder. If we came this far in the last 2 centuries, what kind of mind-blowing, world-changing breakthroughs are we going to see in the next 50 years?